afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another very interesting panel at this year's Delphi Economic Forum. The topic for this panel is NPLs, non-performing loans, and the new developments and the new reality that's happening in Greece regarding services, regarding the industry, and regarding the future and the developments. And we have two major players in the market who know NPLs by heart, who have dealt with NPLs a lot in the past. I'm honored to introduce Mr. Hugo Velez, the CEO of HipoGES in Iberia from Spain, with a very deep and thorough knowledge of the market, and also Mr. Giuseppe Giano, the chairman of Euroxx Securities Greece, who has dealt with NPLs and has a very thoughtful insight on our local market as well as the appetite for NPL investments. So welcome to this afternoon's forum, and I'd like to kick off with Mr. Velez and take advantage of his experience from Spain. So, Mr. Velez, given your experience from Spain and the international market that you have dealt with, how is the Greek market maturing? Do you think there are similarities between Greece and Spain? And if yes, given the fact that Spain is ahead of the curve compared to Greece, what can we learn from your experience?
Well, good afternoon to all. Unfortunately, I'm not physically in the conference, but quite pleasure to be via video conference. I think that the Spanish reality, and I think that's why it's a good question. In part, the deleverage process that this country started, let's say around 2010, in fact. It is not so different from what we have been seeing in the Greek market, because I would say that the servicing space has been created in Greece around the three mega servicers that they are coming out from carve-outs from banks, and additional we have, for example, Quant, which would, let's say that probably is not it's the only one that is not coming realistically from a carve-out. If you look to Spain, this is very similar because the top five servicers in Spain, they exactly come from banks and from carve-outs performed there. So I think this is quite similar to what happened. The difference now is that Spain was faster on creating the servicing capability, in the sense of out of these mega servicers, which most of them, let's say, have a shareholder that ends up being a player of the market and blocks a bit the competition. In Spain, the independent servicers that work more clearly with the multi-client, they come out earlier. And if you look to the Greek market, as the portfolios that are being traded are quite big, it is being quite challenging for the mega servicers to absorb at the right speed these portfolios. If you want to bring more competition from the buyers, so from the credit funds, from the investment banks, having just the servicers that they compete with their shareholders, it is not ideal to attract the medium funds, which will create quite big competition and in fact will maximize the prices from the sellers. And I think even there is still a big challenge on two areas. One is the real estate side. I think now we are seeing some movements finally in the market. We, for example, as a group, we anticipated that real estate services in Greece with the acquisition of a company called Ausvit, exactly to cover all the things that will come from the REOs, which we know that will be always a part of the recovery process. And another point that I think is being progressing, of course, in Greece, and we saw that exactly in Spain, it is the challenge for all these servicers and players to start investing deeply on systems, because the reporting needs in this industry, it is quite challenging and is a need for the business. So that's why I say part, I think, follows the same path of Spain, and in fact the advisories took a lot of information from the Spanish market. But I think we in Greece, we are still a bit delay on creating more servicing capability and independent services, which is going to be key for the industry and for the market.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to revert to Mr. Giano and ask for your insight. So what do you think the current state of play is regarding the Greek NPL market, given your experience, and what role does a company like yours play in it, given the fact that you operate in a different way compared to the mega services that Mr. Velez mentioned?
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Actually, to understand the state of play today of the NPL market, I think we should go back one or two steps and see how this whole thing formed out. We had 10 to 12 years of very hard financial crisis in the country, and banks had a huge backlog of NPEs. Back in March 2016, the backlog of NPEs was around 110, 115 billion, almost 50% of their total loan books. And after 4 years, end of 2020, this number went down to 47 billion. So that's quite an amazing thing that they achieved. And by the end of 2021 and sometime beginning of 2022, their goal is to have a single-digit NPE ratio, which means that they will be diminishing the NPE book again by another 30 billion. So, to use the word of our asset protection scheme, this is actually a Herculean feat indeed. That happened because of very well-organized process and structure that both the Greek government and the management of the Greek banks introduced and worked together, especially with the introduction of our Greek asset protection scheme, Hercules 1, which was really a systemic solution to our NPL problem. Because of all this, today we have an NPL market which is quite vast, with obviously the 3 mega services, but another 23 licensed services from Bank of Greece. And the Greek government is keeping up with the good work by launching Hercules 2 and having the goal of cleaning up the NPEs book and dragging the number to single digit by sometime by 2022, in the next 12 to 18 months, thus addressing all the legacy and potentially pandemic-related NPEs in the country. Just to mention that in the first months of 2021, the Greek banks have traded more than 16 billion of NPEs, which is the largest number in the Eurozone area. And also we have the very successful share capital increase of Piraeus Bank that just finished, which will help the bank achieve its goal. And actually it's going to be a major cleanup of the balance sheet by 20 billion in just 18 months. So all of this comes out to our today, and it's a marketplace which obviously had its problems through all the beginning until today, but now the players are there. I would say the role of companies like Euroxx is to liaise between the banks and potential investors. We know about the big names, the big investors, but the point here is to attract more and more investors, even smaller investors, which are more sector and focused to specific portfolios, whether this is unsecured retail, whether it's real estate or tourism-oriented. So this is more or less our role.
Thank you very much, and I will get back to you on the issue of the investors, which is very, very important, whether and in what ways we can attract those investors. But before that, I'd like to go back to Mr. Velez and ask the COVID-related questions, which is, I guess, on everyone's mind. What do you think, and what do you expect the effect of COVID to be on the NPL market? And given your experience, do you think or you fear a steep increase in the following quarters in terms of NPLs, both in Spain, and if you can give us an insight for a more global perspective, including Greece?
Okay. Well, I think the COVID effect, for sure, it already happened in terms of our industry of NPLs and REOs, or distressed market, because as you could imagine, we now are like from since the COVID started, if we think like as March, We already have 14 months behind this situation, and there was a lot of restrictions in different moments of this timeline in all the countries in terms of lockdowns, restrictions on auctions, correspondent on evictions too, and a number of public and private institutions that blocked a number of acts. Saying this, I believe that is extendable to Spain, to Portugal, to Italy, and specifically to Greece. That the performance on the NPL and REO portfolios were affected. I think the ability of asset management, the ability of servicing, was quite affected. So I think there is one COVID effect that already happened, and of course that has had impact on the performance of this type of investments. Secondly, I would say that of course now, and we were just sharing some views on that, of course that the market is coming back, and I think people are more confident. But still saying this, I believe that the flow of transactions, the pipeline is restarting again. It is true. Investors are coming again to the market, but I think the risk assignment to these investments in nowadays are a bit more penalized. I think will improve for sure, but there is still a gap or a stress in the market in the sense of the typical gap asking bid price. And so I think for one hand, sellers are sometimes postponing or worrying or were delaying some of the deals, and investors were quite more cautious and a bit more conservative and assigning a type of risk differently than before COVID. So I think this is two effects that for sure happened, and we saw during the last 14 months, and I think extendable to Greece and Spain, for example, the number of transactions that have been performed, even on portfolio acquisitions, as an example, had suffered a bit. But saying this, I think we need to clearly congratulate the Greek market because some of the transactions that were planned, they continue and they have been done, and I think it's quite a big success to place big transactions in a moment that we lived during the last, as I said, 12, 14 months. And I think this is quite remarkable. Just to end my view on this, regarding what we could expect, I think my opinion is shared with a number of parties. Is like we know that there was some adjustment on the economy. The number of bankruptcies around the companies in Greece, but extendable to other countries in Europe, has increased. This for sure will create NPLs. There is no other way around. Second thing that we believe that will happen, and all a lot of institutions are projecting, is that we were living and we are still living in different ways with moratoriums, and even on the SME side, but even on the individuals, they will end up, and everyone is anticipating that unfortunately when this is going to start being cancelled, the capability of repaying the loans from the borrowers is going to be affected. And I think an extra stock of NPLs are being expected to come back. And I think this was said before on the previous intervention. So I think everyone is expecting that if the maturity of some markets were being planned for X years, you now need to have at least another 18 to 24 months because the stocks are going to increase. So this, I think, is being shared by a number of people and is what people are expecting for the next months and years.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to return to Mr. Giano now. And Mr. Giano, you have participated in a number of LPM's transactions in Greece. So, given your experience from this one, what are your expectations for the opportunities and the challenges of the market in the coming years? Do you share these feelings? Do you see a brighter side on the market?
as a market complex as the NPE market and large as the one, the problem that Greece faced in the past years, obviously there were implementation risks involved. There was this never-ending process of improving the legislative reforms on behalf of the government. And also now with the pandemic, we have had problems with courts that were closed, restriction in auctions, and delays in the implementation of the new bankruptcy code. Having said that, things are now starting to get back on track, and we are confident that once things will normalize, the recoverability of NPEs will start improving. Also, we have in front of us, as a country, in general speaking, the 32 billion of funds from the recovery fund, which is a huge number compared to the GDP of the country. And this, coupled with the economic recoveries and reforms that the government is doing, will help the economy grow and become stronger than we think even before the pre-pandemic situation. So this is something that we believe that the market will evolve positively. It will help in recovering and increasing asset prices and the recoverabilities of NPEs. So we're confident that we are going to see better days ahead of us.
Thank you very much, and hopefully that will be for the better. We only have 3 minutes at our disposal, so I'd like you to be really brief on the next couple of questions. Mr. Velez, do you think there is room for additional players in the Greek NPL market, or is it saturated as it is? And would you consider entering the market yourself?
Well, as said by my colleague in his first intervention on this panel, like the market has a need to have more players. We need more funds to come, and that's why I was saying in my first intervention that there is a need of servicing capability and independent capability, because only when you have that capability installed, you could bring more medium credit funds, medium hedge funds, and even some investment banks that have been looking around but not putting equity on these portfolios. So that for me is clear, and if that happens with the size of the distressed market that we have in Greece, independence of the GDP of the country, all these funds are anxious to go there. Regarding us, we are already in the market with a licensed company, HipoGES Hellas, and as I said, a real estate company called Auschwitz for that. Our shareholder, it is a credit fund, not very active for now in Greece, but what we are working, and we have already performed that, we bring a number of players, and we are educating a number of clients that work with us in Spain and Portugal, is actually to start deploying money in Greece. So for sure, we will be a player in the market. Thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Giano, you mentioned the opportunity or the possibility for investors coming to the Greek NPL market. So a new fresh money, fresh investor coming in. Do you see a secondary market forming in this sector?
Yeah, we definitely see a secondary market developing for the sector, as we believe that effective restructuring of NPEs by the services would be followed by sale of these reperforming, let's say, loans to new investors, and that is why we need more investors, even smaller ones, to buy those. And also, we believe that the sale of these reperforming loans will be made also to the banks themselves, back to the banks themselves, because they will be in need of new revenues, which will enhance their balance sheet.
So on this positive note, I'd like to thank you both for the interventions and for the very fruitful discussion. Keeping the optimism despite the hardships and despite the problems that the pandemic has caused, and despite Mr. Velez's expectations for higher NPEs, I understand there is room for the market, there is interest in the market, and that given the initiative that the government has taken, we'll see a much better and brighter picture in the years to come. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.